So I'm going to start by introducing you, but if you can introduce yourselves. So we've got Darren and Annette is our advanced heart failure support group leader. And Darren, you're one of our very active members. And I'm one of the cardiomyopathy nurse specialists, so I'm Emma. And we're going to just have a chat today to celebrate Organ Donation Week. So shall I let you introduce yourselves? Annette, do you want to start?
Okay, yeah, I'm Annette, I'm 69, had my transplant when I was 59, or week before, and I live in Devon, and do as much as I possibly can to promote organ donation.
Wonderful. And Darren?
Hello, so yeah, I'm Darren, I'm 55. I'm just over 18 months post heart transplant, which stemmed from dilated cardiomyopathy. I'm doing really well since the transplant. I'm out in Norwich, so it's nice and flat, but yeah, being able to get out and do quite a lot of activity, so really enjoying post-transplant life. Thank you.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. So Annette, you've celebrated your 10-year anniversary this year, which is so wonderful. So tell us your story. Tell us a brief story of what you would like to share about your journey, because it will be interesting to see the differences between your story and what happened with Darren.
Yes. Well, my story began with a teaching exchange trip to Indonesia, from which I came back feeling very unwell, and put it down to jet lag. I haven't done a long haul flight before. And that continued. It continued. GP did lots of blood tests and all sorts of other tests. And I was diagnosed with asthma. And various other things along the way, until 2.5 years later, I was really on the point of collapse. Went to see my GP without an appointment, and so I saw a locum, and the locum asked me how long I'd had a heart murmur for, which no one had picked up before. From there, I went to have an ECG, and then the following day, an echocardiogram, during which the person said, "Please just stay on that bed while I speak to a consultant." And I saw a consultant an hour later, really nice guy, a community consultant, who told me there and then that I had dilated cardiomyopathy. I was stage 4. And this would probably be my pathway, would be to transplant. So from there, I was put on medication, saw various consultants, cardiac consultants, various medication, as you know, Darren, the medication list just gets longer and longer. And then coming up to a year, my electrophysiologist said, "I'm going to refer you for transplant." I went to Patworth, and they said, "We'll watch and wait. We'll watch and see what happens." By that time, they had tweaked my medication, so I was feeling somewhat better, but my exercise tolerance was very low. So that went on for 9 months, and then the following spring, I rang them and said, "I've had flu. I think it's, just finished me off." And immediately they called me in for another assessment, and I was put on the transplant list 2 weeks later. So yes, the infection I picked up in Indonesia had caused myocarditis, so that there was no coming back from it, unfortunately.
So you didn't have a family history of dilated cardiomyopathy. It was all induced by this virus.
My father had dilated cardiomyopathy,
okay.
But that was from medication he was taking.
Okay.
So, so it's not a history.
Yes. My goodness. And then how long did you wait on the list, Annette, before you got that call?
I was 2 weeks on the list.
Wow, so quick.
Yes, luckily Papworth had just started the DCD technology, and I was in the first group of trial. And so that's why it was so quick. Mine was a DCD transplant.
Can you explain what that is for people who may not know?
A DCD transplant is using the heart-in-the-box technology. So the donor has died from a circulatory death rather than the opposite type of transplant of brainstem death. And so the heart is put into this absolutely amazing technology that they've come up with. And it's perfused for up to 6 hours while they do all the tests. So I got to Papworth at midnight when they called me, and then I went down for surgery at 6 o'clock, by which time they decided, it was a good heart. Yes. It's a strange part, that, isn't it, Darren? That waiting bit for the final okay.
Yeah, sure. So you have the call, they found a suitable heart, but it still might be not suitable. You could be waiting and you could be sent home, and that happens to people presumably.
Yes, and you could be one of, I think it's up to 4 people that they would call in.
Right.
And then it would be down to whichever the heart was most suitable for.
Wow.
Yes, I was incredibly lucky on that occasion that it was just me.
And how long did you stay in hospital after you had the transplant, Annette?
17 days.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So short.
I was, yes. And I really expected to be poorly and sickly and, not able to look after myself at home at that stage. But the transformation is just incredible. It really is. Going from having blue hands and face to catching sight of myself in the lift in the hospital a few days later and saying, look at my pink face.
You were perfused.
And the porter saying, they all say that. They all say that.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible.
What
a wonderful feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
How is your story similar to that, Darren? Do you want to tell us your story?
I suppose we've all got slight similarities, but slightly different route into transplant, I think, than Annette. I suppose I was quite active amongst my age group at the point where my heart condition started to show itself. I'd done the Couch to 5K, was running a few sort of 5K park runs. But then one morning just got up to let the dog out and collapsed, passed out, got up, collapsed, got up and went over again. And that's where Mandy, my wife, started her 4th emergency service role by coming in and picking me up off the floor. And a doctor's appointment later that day with a nurse practitioner. It's the first sort of conversation where perhaps Annette knows a similar sort of story where you're having a nice conversation about, journey down here, nice, lovely weather, isn't it? To just going to get a colleague, or just bear with me, I'm just going to make a phone call. And they came back to say, do you think you can get to the hospital quicker than if we called an ambulance? And I came home 2 days later with a pacemaker. My local hospital, the Norfolk and Norwich, incredible people, saw an incredible cardiologist there. And that was put in as a sort of preventive measure to make sure the heart was beating at a good pace, because that had clearly stopped doing so. And then I sort of went back then for sort of retrospective testing. What was the cause of it? So a preventive measure, and then I had like the cardioversions, ablations, ECGs, echocardiograms, and it started to sort of come down to dilated cardiomyopathy. slightly different from Annette because I knew that was within the family, heart disease. My mother unfortunately had dilated cardiomyopathy, and we lost my mum in 2019. So I sort of had an idea of what this could be as soon as they sort of put a pacemaker in. Papworth got mentioned later on after I had my pacemaker out and ICD was put in. That had fired a couple of times and was treating me really regularly, very uncomfortable and very sort of difficult for me to deal with. And suddenly it was transplant. I think we better get you on the radar at Papworth. And that's where I really suffered mentally and emotionally. For me, it'd been quite a hard journey, and everything was just getting worse and worse. Hardly able to walk, hardly able to do anything. Then come along COVID. You're on the sort of highly restricted list. I think we were allowed to open a window at that point for 2 years, and people deliver food and medication to your doorstep. So yeah, they all sort of had time, really, I think, from my point, and mentally and emotionally just not that strong. But as soon as we got to Papworth, you realise you're in such world-class care, exceptional people, awesome people. The 2-day assessment test done. I must admit, imposter syndrome kicked in then, because I thought they were going to tell me to sort of sling my hook. I'm putting this all on, and you don't need a transplant. But they said, we're going to put you on the list, and that was a scary moment for me because I had no real knowledge of the transplant world. I didn't know anyone really outside of my mother who had heart problems, and this all seemed quite sort of fatalistic. And well, how do you get through a heart transplant? That's sort of science fiction stuff, isn't it? So I, at that point, joined the Cardiomyopathy UK Advanced Heart Failure Group that Annette very kindly runs, and I started to get used to the word transplant and seeing people post-transplant. I was put on the list in April 23. I joined the group a few months after that, and my call came fairly out of the blue because I was sort of told it was going to be sort of 3 years plus, if ever. And then December of that year, December 23, the phone rang, and I was on my way to the shops to get some milk, and they said, we have a heart. There will be a taxi outside your house in 1 hour, 20 minutes. Pick the milk up, run home, tell the wife, make all the phone calls that in my head were saying to my daughters and my family the things I wanted to say to them if this was the last phone call, but obviously not alluding to that in those calls. And I was a DCD recipient as well, same as Annette, a few years later on for me. And I was home within 13 days, which still I can't quite get my head around. I've been on longer holidays than that, and suddenly you're back at home with a new heart. And like Annette was saying, the transformation was not quite like someone flicking a switch, because obviously you're very tender, very sore. You can't lift up any weights, and you have to sort of manage life a little bit carefully, but you suddenly got power and energy. And my recovery has been fantastic. Again, the NHS has been remarkable. Cardio rehab, I started the Couch to 5K and really just kicked on from there with the recovery. But yeah, the whole DCD thing is amazing, and Royal Papworth Charity have helped fund a lot of that technology and support that we as patients get to receive. Yeah, so that's my journey up to transplant.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Also so quick.
Yeah.
It's just luck.
Yeah.
It's just luck.
Yeah,
But
I think it is.
The DCD technology has widened the net, really, for people being able to donate.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more hearts that are now available. When you sign the forms, you get the option of whether you accept certain types of hearts from certain types of recipients. I was always of the opinion that if Papworth are prepared to put a heart in me, go to that time and expense and energy of using some of their world-class surgeons, then who am I to not tick that box? So I ticked everything, and yeah, just had the phone glued to my hand. But with that whole, it could be 3 years, it could be never. And all of a sudden, for some reason, I was the match.
Yeah.
And like Annette, one call, one heart, you wait. I was called in around about 9 o'clock, taken into surgery about 3 a.m. Told at any point up to 2:59 a.m. they could pull it and send me home. But we went through and it all was good.
How wonderful. And
Yeah.
do you think that the change in legislation, so between your transplants, the legislation has changed in England, hasn't it, to be an opt-out service rather than us all having to opt in to donate our organs? We can opt out of that. Have you had, with all your, knowledge and involvement, has that made a difference, do you think?
I think my close family, friends, work colleagues, etc., are probably a lot more aware of it. But I think the thing that, if anyone asks me, that I say is just make sure your family know, because they can overrule a decision that you may or may not have already communicated out. And I think potentially because now we're in it, unless we say out, we don't have those conversations. And I can't imagine the difficulty of having lost a loved one, and then a few moments later you're being asked to make a decision as to what their wishes would have been. And I can see why a default decision, if you're unsure, could be no. And there's something like nearly 8,000 people waiting for transplants. I think if we just sort of publicise and need to have that conversation and actually just tell your loved one what your wishes are. And I think we're not overly good potentially about talking about that subject, perhaps as a culture.
Yes.
But it hasn't got to be a long, morbid conversation. I've always used the example, if people talk to me, that it can be as simple as talking to a loved one, do you want a drink? Oh, and by the way, if the time comes, don't let them take anything, or hopefully let them take whatever they need. Oh,
Yeah.
and do you want a biscuit with your drink? And that conversation is enough to lodge that in that person's head for that time to come, but you haven't had to go down a difficult, emotive conversation. But I'm just so glad that my donor's family were incredibly brave enough to say yes. But I do understand why some people may say no without having had that knowledge or that conversation with their loved one.
Of course, yes. And tell me, what do you know about your donor families? Annette,
Um,
do you want to start that one? Do you know much about your donor family?
I asked about my donor maybe 3 months after transplant. I don't know why. I didn't want to know before then. I think it can be the final acceptance that actually someone else has made this generous gift. So yes, I got to know about my donor, and then I wrote to my donor when I was about a year out. I wanted to give them time to grieve. Until then, I felt like I would be encroaching on that. And I had the most lovely letter back from my donor's wife and their son. And it's been lovely to have that conversation with them. She sent me photographs. Again, it's a next step. Actually seeing the person that donated their heart. It's very emotive. I'm lucky in the respect that my children will discuss it at arm's length, and my grandchildren. My son in particular was really good at educating his two daughters. They were 2 and 3 at the time. And so they were totally on board about my transplant, completely understood where that would come from and why. So it's been quite an open conversation in our family. My children carried donor cards from the age of 11 and 14. They'd had a talk at school, at senior school. And initially it was the 2 older ones who came home with their cards. Can we sign these? And we had that conversation. And then their younger brother said, well, they've got one, I want one too. So they've all carried donor cards. Yes, yeah. For our family, it's been an open conversation. But other families, it's not, as Darren says. It is a difficult conversation. And when I'm out with the organ donation sign-up group here, there are still a lot of people that worry about how that donation will be taken. Still a lot of people that would agree to solid organs, but not their eyes. So yeah, we have some very interesting conversations out there when we're out with the sign up, and we never approach anyone. We wait for people to approach our table. And of course now we're more emphasis on having that conversation with families.
Yeah.
Especially if the family is with them. There are still people that say, "Oh, I don't want to discuss that. It has nothing to do with me." To a degree, I agree with them. But as we always say, there's nothing that anyone can do with your organs once you've gone. They are of no use to you or your family, but they could be of use to someone else. And a lot of people come round to that thinking when it's been explained face to face. Still people that don't understand about the opt-in, opt-out scheme. Yeah. So it's still a big conversation out there. Monthly. I don't go monthly, but the man that started the sign up here, he's out there every single month.
How wonderful.
Yes. Yeah.
And Darren, tell us, what do you know about your wonderful donor?
Yeah, I was at 4 months when I asked for some information. So the transplant centres have some information. They can tell you the age, gender, and a little bit more sort of emotive information potentially about how the donation came to be about. And I handed my letter over at that point at 4 months. I just had this real need to let them know that I was here, that the organ that I'd received had been used, and that I hoped that I was going to make the most out of it. I didn't know what to get back, if I'd get anything back. I went into it quite eyes wide open, and Papworth are very good at explaining that to me as well. I've always thought about it as potentially finding out I'd been adopted and I could send a letter to my birth parents, but it might not be a Disney ending to it all. They might not want to know me, etc. So I went in quite sort of open-minded about that. But I did receive a letter 4 months later from my donor's sister. So I know a little bit more now about my donor and name, and a little bit of their life story, their likes, and what they did in the world. I've written again, haven't heard a follow-up, but I will write again in a month's time. I had the incredible honour of walking my daughter down the aisle just a few days ago, and then doing the British Transplant Games. And next month I'm doing Run Norwich, which is a 10k road race, and I just wanted to sort of wrap that up in a letter, send that off to them in the hope that just to give them some idea that I am treating this seriously. I am trying to do the best I can with their wonderful gift, but yeah, then accept that the ball's in their court whether they want any more communication or not. But I feel lucky to have had a letter back, because I know some people never do get that. So yeah, I feel very happy to have at least had that letter back from them.
Oh, how wonderful. It's like the biggest thank you letter you could ever write, isn't it?
It is, and I appreciate why some people haven't quite got to the point they feel they can write, because it is how do you start that letter off? What do you put? There's no training on that, but there are some guides out there, and I know Papworth again do a very good guide on what to write. But it is a difficult letter. It is very emotive. You don't know the circumstances, but I just felt that was something that I had to do. I had to say a thank you. I had to let them know that I was about because of what they'd done, and that I was going to hopefully do good with that donation going forward.
Yes. And how does the hospital broach that subject? Is it that it's available for you, but you have no pressure to do that if you don't want to?
Yeah, Papworth, a very good one. I said I'd like to know some information to the transplant nurses. Took me into a room with my wife at that point and said, look, if we tell you this, we cannot take this information back. You need to be really, really clear that you want to hear this. It might be very emotive, like Annette was saying. So it could be the age, that could be something that really takes a lot to sort of digest. So no, they were incredibly supportive, gave us as much time. And when I said, yes, I do want to know, they handled it very sensitively. They checked the letter. There's certain information that you can't disclose. And as long as that's okay and you don't need to redact anything, that goes on to a central point. Again, that's checked. And at that point, they contact the family to say there is a letter here should you wish to receive it. I don't get to know whether they receive it or not. And then it was a phone call out of the blue that we have a reply. Do you want to receive that reply? So it's handled very, very sensitively. And we're always guided not to give too much information away in any sort of public conversation about our donors. So in interviews like this or anything we ever do sort of public, we try and keep that information quite sort of sensitive to ourselves. But yeah, no, they handled it fantastically, explained everything, and certainly weren't trying to make it sound like it's all going to be perfect and lovely and you'll meet and there'll be hugs and things like that. It was this is where it could go, this was where it might go, this is where it might also go. Before we go on those steps, think carefully about it. So no, they handled it fantastically from my point of view. I don't know about Annette.
Yes, the same. I don't think it was quite as much of a conversation as you have now. Certainly the non-disclosure was a big thing at that time, especially because of the DCD, because that was in its infancy. So I was asked to wait a number of weeks. I think it was 6 weeks before I announced my transplant on social media, obviously family knew. But yes, we did have a conversation, and like Darren, we went into a room and the coordinator did discuss and gave me, the ups and downs of knowing who your donor is, and yes, do we still want to go ahead? And all the letters that I've had a phone call first before they've arrived, just to warn you that another letter is here. Do you want to see it? Which I think is lovely, actually. To have that type of letter just drop through your letterbox, I think could be quite difficult for some people.
Yes, I've seen other members of the group quite emotional when they've had letter contact.
Yes, and there are some people that don't want to know.
Yeah,
and I think that needs to be respected. For some people, it's just a step too far to know the personal details of that person. Yeah.
And do you know if the donor family could reach out to you, or is it always for the recipient to make first contact?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I was always told that I can write, and it was always talked to me about in my control. No one ever said to me, you might get a letter, we might contact you about a letter. So I'm probably assuming, but I think it's possibly the recipient who probably kickstarts that process off.
Yeah.
I can't think of being told by anyone else that had had a letter before they'd sent one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you know of any people who've met up with donor families?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I know a number.
Ah,
I'm still a little wary of that. It must have been 10 years this year has made me really think about it and think that if I am going to do that, then I need to do it sooner rather than later. So it is that conversation in my head at the moment about whether I contact them, and I don't know how that works, whether I make the suggestion, whether I have to wait for them to make the suggestion. It's a conversation I need to have with Patler to go to that next step.
yes. What an
Yeah.
experience that would be.
It would, yes. Yeah,
Very emotional, I would think, on both sides.
Yeah. yes. You know,
Yeah.
I do know people that have done that, and it's been very successful. But I wonder if it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And of course, the family have the right to say no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So you need to be prepared for that as well.
Is that something you've thought about, Darren?
Yeah, I suppose as soon as I wrote, you sort of think, well, what do I hope? Where do I hope this goes? I suppose ultimately, if I had that opportunity, I would grasp that to meet. But also, I know that quite rightly, the ball's in their court regarding that. And if it is to go any further than this one letter, then it's at their pace. But yeah, if I could, I would. I would like to say a face-to-face thank you. But I do really appreciate what Annette's saying, because I can imagine in some circumstances that has to be managed. Both parties have got to sort of probably be prepared for a face-to-face and where that might go. And I can imagine that can be very intense emotively and emotionally. And where does it go after that? So yeah, I think it's a very delicate process, and like Annette says, not for everyone. But personally, if that opportunity came for me, then yeah, I would take that in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah, and my other thought is when you've got children and the family involved, how does that affect them as well? I think that's got to be part of the conversation with them as well, because ultimately, when anything happens to the recipient, of what happens to the relationship then. So yeah, so
Yes.
there's lots to think about, I think, before you rush in to meet donor families.
Yes, really is. Darren, you mentioned the transplant games.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. I know they've just had this year's games have just happened, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, in Oxford. So I first heard about the transplant games actually in Papworth a few days after recovery. One of the volunteers at Papworth, Trevor, he visited the wards, and he'd been part of it. He mentioned it, and as soon as I heard that, I thought, "Ooh, that sounds quite interesting, doesn't it?" And I made a promise to myself that within sort of 3 years, I would have a go at getting around the 400 meters. When he said, "Oh, the track and field take place in the stadium," I thought, "God, just imagine being able to do a lap without stopping." And I thought, "Oh, 3 years." The next morning, I woke up and I thought, I reckon I could 2 years I could do that. And a couple of days later, it was, I'll give that a go next year. I think I'll give it a go. And then I think it was the day before I left, I thought, nah, sod that, I'm going for it this year. And so I took part in the transplant games just under 8 months post heart transplant. and I did the 400 meters. It wasn't pretty. I was last by a long way. I remember getting to halfway and thought I'll just have a glimpse where the next bloke is to see if I can catch him. And no, they were all at the end hugging each other. So I had another half a lap to go. But and the finish was right in front of the stadium. But my wife says I got a bigger cheer than the person who finished first. So it was a promise to myself. And to be honest, at Transplant Games, you can be as competitive as you like. And me, I was competitive with myself. I wanted to keep that promise I'd made in hospital to myself. But others would sprint for everything for the finishing line. And but I did get a medal in another event. But it was more about being around the people. I met people post-transplant who were going, oh, I'm 5 years post, I'm 7 years post, I'm 15, 25, 30. And it was like I came away so inspired that actually, whilst perhaps I'd been quite fatalistic beforehand, and you sort of think, well, a transplant isn't a cure, it's potentially there's a prognosis here that isn't always easy to digest. But coming away from that, meeting such incredibly inspiring people who were out there achieving despite what they'd gone through, I came back completely changed, hooked on the games, the social aspect of it, just the positivity of it. I mean, this year we're at Oxford, and that was at Blenheim Palace. I did archery at Blenheim Palace. I haven't done archery since I had little suction cups on the end, and about 6 or 7. And I turn around after firing some arrows, and behind me is Blenheim Palace, and you think, I've got here because of having had a transplant, because of my donor, and actually the options and the opportunities that are now there for me. And we had the closing ceremony at Oxford University examination halls, places I'd never get to see, people I'd never get to meet. I love it. I really do love it. It's a great team we have at Papworth, and I'm sure all the other hospitals have great teams, and we all mix, and you've got something in common with everyone. It's not like walking in the room and not having an open gambit conversation point. It's, well, what did you have done? How many games you been? How long post transplant are you? And yeah, it's huge. It's huge. I just wish it got more publicity. But yeah, I found it incredible. And yeah, I'm about to request some leave from work for next year in Sheffield. I'm addicted to the Transplant Games. Yeah, fantastic.
How wonderful. That is wonderful.
One thing I should mention about them is we have a donor walk. So this year the donor walk was at Blenheim Palace. And it is a walk or a jog or a run, whatever you want to do. It's in memory of your donor. So there's a lot of people who dress up, and we do have donor families on that walk as well, representing the donors. And you get a memorial or commemorative medal at the end of it, and that's such a huge thing. And I would go just for that alone, to be honest, with the games. Loved it.
Wonderful.
Love it.
How many donor families, or how many people take part altogether?
I think this year was the biggest, and I think there was over 1,000 competitors. But then obviously you get supporters and family who go along as well. So it's a big event. Well, very well organised at some fantastic venues. And Donor Walk alone, there were 2,000-3,000 possibly. I don't know the full number, but huge, and yeah, such a lovely setting around the lakes at Blenheim, and I say, to honour your donor, and I say people really do celebrate that aspect of it, and it's really nice to see, especially with the donor families there, to hopefully see what people are doing with what's happened and what they've done for their loved ones.
Yeah, the difference it's made for you. Yeah, of course.
It's a brilliant occasion, isn't it?
Yeah.
I loved the donor walk. If you can't go for anything else, then you can go for the donor walk. It is just so lovely. Yeah.
How wonderful. Everyone coming together to celebrate organ donation.
And with the opening ceremony as well, again, the teams come in, then you get the children's hospitals, which I'm quite a weepy person post-transplant. I think I was weepy before transplant, but that you get a bit of dust in your eye that when they come in. And then at the end it's the donor families, and I'm a gibbering wreck at that point when they come in. But it's a really lovely, wholesome experience to transplant. transplant games. But so you can be very, very competitive. And I think the teams are now heading off to Dresden for the World Games. So there'll be a GB team going by coach, train, plane, ferry as we speak, with all the other countries heading to Dresden and Germany for, I think it's Sunday that kicks off. So yeah, it's a fantastic community. Yeah.
How brilliant.
Yeah,
I feel
really
that is a really positive note to finish on. But is there anything else that you would like to say, bearing in mind we're celebrating Organ Donation Week? Is there anything I haven't asked you?
I think as a recipient, I'm very much aware that my family went through all this with me, and the impact on them. I think I had the easy bit. I turned up, they injected me, I fell asleep and woke up later on. They had to deal with all that cold stone sober. But yeah, all because of a magical decision by a donor and their donor family. I think if there was any message to anyone listening who's thinking about it, I would just say, live your life, have a brilliant life, live it to the full, and then pass that on, because someone can carry on that for you and you can become the hero in someone else's story.
That's lovely.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the psychological impact of transplant for families it is huge, and it is a conversation that we need more of between families, both for the opt-out system and just for everyone's mental health. I know I was lucky, but I know families that just cannot talk about it because the trauma is just so big. It's opening up a wound, isn't it? So yeah, conversation is what's needed around transplant for all aspects. Yeah.
Keep talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Keep talking. Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's such a privilege to have heard your stories. Thank you so much. And I will look forward to seeing you both next week at our meeting with everybody else.
Yeah.
And there'll be more talk about transplant games.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, we'll get everybody to bring their medals for next week.
Yes, medals. Exactly. It'll be wonderful to see them.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.